Yeah, man.
Yeah,
I
man.
get that feeling
I
too.
get that feeling too. Yep.
It's draft season, so watch cornhole, bud. I guess watch what we say because YouTube. I think they demonetized your on the couch, Bloom,
Oh no.
because of your BS
Oh,
drop.
yeah.
Yeah,
Sorry,
you know
Joe.
what? You know our big tech overlords looking over us. Can't say anything bad.
No.
Yeah. Anyway, let's do
It
this
was
thing.
my fault. I just was happened to be there. That's what happened.
You always happen to be around when that happens, man.
It does. I don't say it, but it happens to happen. I should be like Dwayne Eskridge. I like instigate stuff. The penalty gets called on somebody else.
Okay, let's do this thing in 3, 2, 1. This tight end class has a player who will be amongst the highest drafted ever at the position. A bunch of behind him, maybe. We'll see what Matt Waldman says and more. Good evening. It's the Audible Live. It is tax day, April 15th. It's Cecil Lammey, Sigmund Bloom, and Matt Waldman. We are here for you. Sigmund, you are back, and we celebrate your return.
I am back, and it's good to be back. 2 weeks until the draft. We'll be back here in 2 weeks. You go to Cleveland, Cease?
No. Let's just say I'm not exactly putting my foot on the gas to go to Cleveland.
Oh, well, yeah. What's
if it was in Vegas, might be different.
Right,
Sorry, Cleveland. I already got in trouble years ago for calling Cleveland the armpit of America.
That's okay. I actually got to talk to Jared today. It's his 40th birthday. Happy 40th birthday, Jared.
Okay.
We love Jared.
Nice.
So, there are lots of good things in Cleveland.
Both boys.
So, 2 weeks until the draft, and even Cecil Lammey himself dropping a little bit of truth bombs out there. I think expanding our minds to the possibilities, because there are already things that may or may not have happened that would surprise us. So we should expect to be surprised, expect the unexpected in 2 weeks here on the Audible. And it seems maybe you can drop in and join us for like just a couple of minutes. I don't know.
Right. Well, and here's the thing. I don't want to make it all about me, but whatever. This is something I've been working on since February.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because April is the month of lies. So, Matt, I'll toss it to you, and Bloom, I'd like you to chime in as well.
Yeah.
When I report from multiple sources that the 49ers offered their number 12 pick for Sam Darnold, the Jets were slow playing it. They're like, we're worried about Zach Wilson's shoulder. We want to see him at his pro day. Now they feel great about it. Wilson's going to be the number 2 pick. That's a given. We know the first and second picks in this draft. The third one, I have some information on. I'll save it for just a little bit. But the 49ers are like, okay, screw you guys. We're going to go home. And actually, we're going to move up to number 3. We're going to move mountains to do that. But that was in the works. I know that's going national now, and Pat McAfee's saying, like, I'm a good guy, but this is total BS. They're all cleaning it up for our big tech overlords. I'm like, well, I feel comfortable in my sources, and obviously I've been vetting this since February. So it's not that April month of lies thing. Plus, it doesn't come from agents, because we know agents will tell you the sky's pink if it does something for their client or hurts another client. This comes from people that work in buildings. This doesn't come from beat writers. This comes from people who know what was going to happen. So, Matt, when I report that, one, does it surprise you that the Jets are going to be the Jets and be like, what? Number 12 for Sam Darnold? Nah, we don't need that.
I don't think anything really surprises me with that. And I would say that if you vetted that story since February, then I don't have much more to comment about that other than I'm not going to sit there and say it's BS, but that's because I know you. And I think anybody who actually has their head outside of a podcast microphone probably and looks at media would probably understand that as well.
All right, Sigmund, what do you think about that?
And I agree that you're a good guy. You're a good guy, Cecil. Well, again, I get really hung up in a good way on how this number 3 pick in San Francisco is one of the most exciting. Guys, I can't think of another pick that so clearly shows the psychoanalysis of one football mind, a respected football mind in Kyle Shanahan, right? And I think that before San Francisco traded up, when we evaluated these quarterbacks, the idea of Mac Jones as a quarterback that would go number 3, a quarterback that a team would trade 3 first-round picks for the right to take him, just seemed absurd. It just seemed absurd compared to the upside, the ceiling, the range of possibilities of Justin Fields and Trey Lance. And what we saw was Adam Schefter, Daniel Jeremiah, Chris Mortensen. We don't need to talk about some of their names, but enough names to give it credibility. Either saying, I think we can't rule out Mac Jones, or even more specifically, I think Mac Jones is the pick. And you know who joined that chorus today and then quickly deleted it? Matt Mayoko. So if I said, name a 49ers beat writer that you would trust.
Oh, Mayoko's the top of the list.
He's the guy.
Yeah.
And he said, and he chooses his words very carefully. He said, I believe Mac Jones was the player that Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch had in mind when they traded up to number 3. But it doesn't mean they're going to take him. And Kyle Shanahan said there are 3 they're comfortable with, but there's 4 or even 5 potentially at the party. So, and it kind of matches up with going to Fields' pro day yesterday and then Trey Lance's second pro day on Monday. The reason I bring all this up and draw all this out is that we have had to stretch our minds, except for Matt Waldman, who was in the bunker. It saves you a lot of this, flapping and whapping and waving that we all do over this stuff, Matt. To like, really? Because I don't want to believe it. Like our good friend Eric Stoner would say, like, we deserve to have the possibility, to see the possibilities of a quarterback like Fields or Lance in this offense, right? Like, just for the football fan, you want to see it. You want to see it come to life with one of those quarterbacks. And yet here we are staring down the barrel of Mac Jones. The reason I bring all this up is I think it just from almost an objective point of view, difficult to digest that, right? Like what sticks in your craw, And that's the same reaction people would have to the idea of Kyle Shanahan offering up the number 12 pick for Sam Darnold in year 4 of his rookie contract. Yet we can't just reject these things. Obviously, we're getting a pretty strong signal here that Kyle Shanahan has a different matrix of evaluating quarterbacks than we do. And by we, I mean almost everybody. I mean, look at any big board. Mac Jones is nowhere near the top 5 or 10 on the big board. He's often well below Fields and Lance on the big board. And we have to adjust to that. And what I think is one of the more fascinating things we'll look back on this quarterback offseason for, okay? Carson Wentz, failed quarterback, right? Bottomed out last year. They've given up a second and probably a first, as long as Wentz doesn't get hurt. A second and a first. And Wentz is guaranteed like oodles of money, like the gross national product of like a county or something, Sam Darnold. Also, I mean, even if you're the biggest Sam Darnold fan in the world and you say it's Adam Gase's fault, what has Darnold done to give you something to hang your hat on at all? At all. He gets a second, a fourth, and a sixth. Jared Goff, who arguably at his best was performing more efficiently than Wentz or Darnold has at any point in their career, the Lions got a first to take on Jared Goff. So I think we'll look at these 3 and see how, for some reason, one was, underwater and sold at a auction, and the other 2 still got premium prices. It's really interesting, and I think the bottom line is the NFL perception of these quarterbacks is different than us. That doesn't mean we're wrong. It doesn't mean they're right, but there's a gap.
Well, it goes back and shows us that the dirty little secret is all about fit. And Matt, Vegas is saying Justin Fields is most likely to be number 3. Now, I'll be full disclosure. There are plenty of Denver, San Francisco connections. I mean, hell, they're practically joined at the hip. Whether that's John Lynch himself, Kyle Shanahan, Adam Peters is there doing great work. I'm glad the Broncos let Adam go, but that was an asset. You want to know I always struggled in some drafts? I think it's losing a guy like Adam Peters. That's my opinion. So I will say this, like the ship is pretty tight with San Francisco, more so than usual. I've done a pretty good job of being able to basically know who their pick's going to be before the draft. Not bragging, but that's just how it's been with that team because of several different connections. This year, I'm guessing it's Trey Lance. Vegas is guessing it's Justin Fields. And what's funny to know, and I didn't hear Pat McAfee talk about me today, and if he did, he's the greatest guy ever. But I think it's funny when he's calling my report complete BS, and he had Dan Orlovsky on like, why is Justin Fields falling, and let Orlovsky say those god awful things that he didn't research and weren't his opinion, just what he's heard. But anyone that's talked to teammates of Justin Fields, anyone's talked to coaches of Justin Fields, and hell, anyone's talked to Fields himself, would know that's complete BS when he says that. And yeah, I'm going to rail on Orlovsky every single week because he wears a sweater and a sport coat, and he's, it's more sizzle than steak. All right, let's get to it. Because Vegas is saying Fields as the most likely. I'm guessing it's Lance. And by the way, there's people that I talked to within the league, Matt, that are just laughing that it'll be Mac Jones. Like, oh, I hope they do take Mac Jones, because you know why? We want Justin Fields. So let's talk about this, Matt.
Sure. Well, I mean, first of all, I think we'll trail upon what Bloom just talked about in terms of why the perception is the way it is about Mac Jones in the first place. And I think that if you were going to be a Mac Jones fan on any level, you would understand that when you compare him to prospects with great physical skills like Trey Lance and Justin Fields, that on the surface, it's much easier to evaluate those types of skills, arm strength, mobility, size, ability to break tackles, make big plays, than it is to evaluate the conceptual skill of quarterbacking. So as a result of that, you're often going to see that when you have a player who, like Mac Jones, who came out you really had one big year and that's it, really only 1 year, other people are going to look at that and say there's kind of a cognitive dissonance about picking a player with conceptual skills that we just don't know whether they're going to grow. We don't see that level of, it's hard to tangibly see how that grows and project that growth than it is to tangibly project a quarterback who has all the physical skills in the world. And that they will probably continue to grow on a conceptual level. But you can't expect a guy who's just conceptual level only. You can't expect him to outgrow those physical guys, even if he does, but that's why the Tom Brady's of the world are drafted low, and you look at why it's so an easy idea to look at guys who have all the physical ability in the world, even to Blaine Gabbert, being drafted as high as he was because of all the physical skills that he had. So with that in mind, I mean, when we talk about Mac Jones, and, if it's not him, and I would think it isn't, because most NFL teams, when you look at the top 100 of the NFL, the NFL top 100, and it seems like 8 out of every 10 players that I see talk about a guy on the list is like, he's so big, he's so fast, he's so strong, he's so agile. And then the two players who are like all pros might say, yeah, well, actually he gives our defense fits and then breaks down in a very technical level about, why he poses such a problem for their team, and gets into schematics and gets into technique and all of those things, rather than big, strong, fast. And it's understandable, but that's why also evaluation is the way it is, because you'll have former football players who come on, and some of them are absolute geniuses and do a great job evaluating. Some of them are absolute geniuses, but their only experience is big, strong, fast, hug, and that's their whole process, because that's what they're in awe of. So,
and then there's others who are Dan Orlovsky.
Then there are others for sure. And so, you have Fields, you have Lance. If it were me, I'd pick Lance because he's my second-rated quarterback, and I think he has all the skills you're looking for to develop, and he could sit behind Garoppolo a little bit as a bridge starter and then really get in there, and he can give you the running skills, but he also, I think, gives you just a slightly more, I think he gives you a little bit more of a dimension as a reader of the field than Justin Fields, as much as that Fields, I don't have any really worries about him being able to make reads. He can read the whole field. He just was in an offense where he didn't have to do that all the time. He has great accuracy, he has great arm. But if they're going to go with Fields because he's the more proven commodity, I don't blame them. Either one of those guys makes total sense to me. Mac Jones, I can see why you'd want to wait a little bit longer on him.
Sigmund, you missed out on the whole my whole Dan Orlovsky rant. I'll let you rant if you'd like, brother. But what do you think about Vegas picking Fields as the most likely number 3 pick?
I think we should pay attention to it. Again, and I don't want to wax rhapsodic or poetic about this. I'm glad that I'm going to get to be with Matt Waldman. We'll see who we slate for the first hour of the live show, so we can truly react live to this, whatever it is. I've even got, there's some stuff that ended up here on the desk by accident, but I actually can do, like, Austin. I'm taking a page out of Austin. We love Austin. Like, if it's Justin Fields, Trey Lance, dun-dun, dun-dun. I'm cool, we're feeling cool.
Right.
Mac Jones. I'm gonna keep these by my side. But and I think Matt did a good job laying it out. I think that we need to look at this because, and maybe it was Kyle Shanahan and Justin Fields talking at the pro day yesterday, right? I think it was our man, Still Ryan 5, saying, yes, I'm going to overreact to this. But it's our hearts wishing that we can see the Kyle Shanahan scheme unlock these talents. Whereas Mac Jones, we've already seen what a player like Mac Jones can do in this scheme. I think that we're going to have great suspense. We're going to have great suspense at number 4. The number 4 choice, we're going to talk about Kyle Pitts tonight. But also Atlanta has to know that a player like Fields or Lance, and it's almost sure that one of them will be there, if not both, at 4. You don't get a quarterback like that at number 4 in most drafts. That quarterback goes 1 or 2. So Terry Fontenot and Arthur Smith, apparently, it was reported, had a difference of opinions about Matt Ryan or whether to take a quarterback. So that's an interesting choice. Of course, there's the Cincinnati
I hate
choice.
to break in, Sigmund.
Yeah,
I'm the one that broke that story, and I said at the end of the day, Arthur Blank, who backs Matt Ryan, said, "You make the call." He backed down to Fontenot and said, "You make the call. I'd like to keep Ryan around, but you make the call." And that call at 4 should be a quarterback, but I don't think they keep the pick. More on that in a little bit.
Yeah, and then you get Cincinnati, and Cincinnati's choice isn't easy. Even if it goes quarterback, and they're choosing between Sewell and Chase to reunite with Joe Burrow, or Pitts, and then Miami, and there's the Tua story and all that background. Then there's Detroit. Detroit could look at a quarterback. Carolina could look at a quarterback. Denver, that's your territory, Cease. And there's also New England's lurking in the weeds. Washington is lurking in the weeds to move up for a quarterback. And then, we haven't even gotten to some really exciting names like Rashawn Slater. Whatever team takes Rashawn Slater, be very happy. The cornerbacks, guys, Asante Samuel Jr. and Patrick Surtain Jr. and Joe Horn's kid. I mean, are we old or what? We've really been doing this long enough that the players that we actually evaluated for football guys, sons, are now in the draft.
I hear there's a whole team for Travis Henry. like there's a whole team coming up. We might actually get
Antonio
to pick a unit.
Yeah, right. The Travis Henry versus Antonio Cromartie team. So it's like biblical. Begat.
11 on 11.
So I'm just getting amped up at the reveal, and I feel I've been telling 49ers fans I'm praying for you. Just because this is the big reveal, the big moment where you see the direction of this franchise, and there's a lot more after that. And as I was saying, I did a show with Paul Perticchese today. Love Paul. Congratulations, Paul, on the birth of your second child. That the destinies watching this, like, we're going to be just adjusting to and absorbing our whole future track for some of these franchises, and we're going to get hit with another depth charge and another one. And that first 60 minutes of this draft is truly the plate tectonics at work. And look, guys, we could really, for the next 2 weeks, just get into all these possibilities and try to discern what it means if. And that's why it's a relief. I think we all feel the relief when the draft finally gets here.
Does Atlanta keep 4 or do they move it? Denver wants to move up. The strongest and latest buzz is that they will move up. If you were to put the odds on stay put, move back, or move up, put your chips on move up with the Denver Broncos. That's to number 4, Matt. That's for Justin Fields. From what I know, may be a favorite around the building. Obviously, Trey Lance is in the conversation as well. Less so Mac Jones. That seems to be a common theme here. I think people got a little bit cute, Matt, as often happens. Everyone's making mock drafts, and you got to be different. Because honestly, if you made a mock draft from, the combine till now, it'd mostly be the same. Mostly. If you were trying to go for accuracy. but people aren't going for accuracy with mock drafts. They're going for clicks and like, what if this happens? And I get that. I understand that. But if it is the case where Atlanta is giving up 4, do you agree with that? Especially because that means they would be passing on one of those quarterbacks. Maybe if they move back to 9 with Denver, they could still get Mac Jones at 9, whatever. But is it a mistake for Atlanta to move from 4, Matt?
I understand the point of view that they feel like that at least some people in the building feel like Matt Ryan probably has 3 to 4 years left as a possibility, and he could stretch that kind of like Phillip Rivers stretched it or Drew Brees stretched it. But either way you look at it, I feel like that there's a little bit of reactionary thinking that pervades the NFL, which is that if Atlanta actually stays put, I would like to see them draft Justin Fields or Trey Lance and let them sit. And who better to actually be a mentor than Matt Ryan and Matt Schaub, actually, and have them both there and not have any pressure really for those quarterbacks to be able to play right away.
And to learn from Arthur Smith.
Yeah, exactly. And you get a terrific atmosphere for them, because if we look at all the quarterbacks who are actually worth a darn in this league, most of them either sat by accident, or it was by design. Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, Drew Brees, Patrick Mahomes. There's a number of players. Phillip Rivers, who just retired, certainly could be added to that list. Steve Young had to sit for years. I mean, if we just look, to me, it's funny how the truth is sitting there staring them in the face and kind of slapping them on the forehead, and they're just like, we need him to play right away. And it's just like, why? I mean, take your top pick now and do that, especially if you're at a position with a luxury. So I would prefer that. I think that happens? No, I think that if they're tempted to, Atlanta tends to have this mentality, even with Arthur Blank, as much as I admire him as an owner, this team seems to be up and down. Like one year they're great, the next year they're horrible. And this team hasn't really been able to escape that mentality. I'd like to see Blank maybe be able to be a part of that. But if he's like, Fontenot, you go ahead and make the call here. Well, if that's the case, then the offensive coordinator is going to be the one to say, I need to make my name now. We need to get the, or maybe it's like, it's either going to be, we need to get some more weapons in here. Maybe we'll trade it down and start that way. Now, if Fontenot wants the player, which is what you reported, then I guess that would make sense then. Maybe let me backtrack on that, because maybe if it makes sense for Fontenot wants the player and it's his call, maybe they don't make the trade and maybe then they do the right thing. But I wouldn't even be surprised if they make the trade and there's somebody they like Davis Mills, and say, you know what, he's a blank slate. We can give him a couple years. And then if he doesn't work out during these next 2 years in terms of the progress we see him making, we can pick another guy. When the draft, once the draft comes near, there is another Manning coming down the pike.
Yeah, Newman down here in New Orleans.
Yeah, there you go. By the way, he made Bloom smile when you talk about Davis Mills. It is the Audible Live, and Bloom, you mentioned Kyle Shanahan said there's 5 guys at the party, something like that. The second best player in this draft is Kyle Pitts. Third best, you're being negative. Third best player is Kyle Pitts.
Right
there, and I did a Visson show yesterday. It's Vegas Sports Network with Pritch, actually. And I was asked about, Pitts to San Francisco. And I was like, well, I mean, it sounds nice and all, but you make that type of move, that's a power move for a quarterback. Okay, but let's jump into the tight end conversation, because as JC Horn said, this guy's not a tight end. No. He's a wide receiver. He's a big-bodied wide receiver. He'll probably go higher than any tight end in NFL history has gone. He reminds me of Darren Waller. Matt seems to like that comparison, Sig. So let's talk about Pitts. Pitts at 3, but Pitts at 4. If they're not going to go quarterback, and maybe they wait. Maybe Atlanta's so far away from competing, they're like, okay, we can wait and take our guy next year and move on from Ryan after this year. Whatever is whatever. But Pitts at 3 or 4 seems like that's going to happen.
Yeah. We can't. So let me lay out a few things. Sentiments again. We'll bring in the Pink Panther. You guys remember Tijuana Toads? Remember that? I think Jackie Mason maybe was an anteater in that show. Anyway. Whatever team gets Trey Lance, I'm going to applaud. whatever team gets Trey Lance, whatever they give up for him, I'm going to applaud. Whatever team gets Justin Fields, whatever they give up for him, I'm going to applaud. Like, look, if Denver trades up to number 4 to get Fields and gives up the same thing as San Francisco, even though it was 12-3 versus 9-4, I'll still applaud. Whatever team takes Kyle Pitts, I'll applaud. And I think that at some point, I made the speech. People were going to get really tired of me making this speech. And as I mentioned when Matt and I recorded yesterday, spoiler alert for the Bloom 100, which will come out. Sorry, folks, I'm a little behind this year. Number 1 will be Kyle Pitts. Yes, number 1 in a typical PPR 1 quarterback fantasy league will be Kyle Pitts. And if you're in a super flex tight end premium, there's a debate. I don't think it's clearly Trevor Lawrence. I think you can make an argument for Kyle Pitts. There could not be more glaring signs that Kyle Pitts is, as we've all been saying, a unicorn. That we haven't seen one come this way like him before. And again, I'll refer back to Chris Trapazzo, who I had on the show a few weeks back, saying that he has subtlety and nuance. I was going to say nuddlety. I was going to put together subtlety and nuance into one word. Nuddlety. He has polish. He has skill. And he is a truly ideal physical prospect. And again, I'll refer to Lance Zierlein, who does not get carried away, saying that other teams in Kyle Pitts' division might have to rethink their roster because he's in their division. That's the kind of player that he is going to be. Don't tell me about what tight ends have come before. Don't tell me about top 10 tight ends and the lack of impact they've made, or even the lack of impact they made in their first year. I don't care. So if we start to see Pitts fall, like, Detroit, they got who cares if they have TJ Hawkinson? Who cares?
What's he done?
Yeah.
Besides get hurt.
Sure. And it just doesn't matter. If Cincinnati, right. That's true. That's true. Don't have your incentives tied to Pro Bowls if you're a team, okay? If Carolina takes him, I mean, Denver's the one team, Cease, in the top 10 that I feel certain wouldn't take him.
But if George Payton says he's BPA,
that's true.
If Pitts is staring at you at 9, how do you not say he's not BPA? He's BPA.
Right. He's BPA. Yeah, he absolutely is. I don't think we're going to have a chance to ponder that, though, because I think that teams realize how rare he is. And I think for fantasy, we need to understand. I know people say don't chase outliers. But there could not be somebody announcing themselves more clearly as an outlier than Kyle Pitts.
All right, Matt, author of the Rookie Scouting Portfolio. Check it out at mattwaldman.com. Kyle Pitts, his talent, his potential. What did you see? Let's break this down, brother.
I need a little comic relief here, though, first, because we're all together again for the same time.
Okay.
And David Rodriguez just made a little thing on Twitter about our couch episode with Bloom and I, where he described us as fortune teller OBGYNs. Yeah. So I want to see Bloom. I almost lost I think I did lose my
you did. You turned red.
Yeah. So I'm thinking I want Bloom to have like Dr. Mafume Sigmund Bloom OBGYN as his little label down, like right at the bottom here. Right. So he could read fortunes and
maybe we're midwives,
exactly like that.
Joe likes to say we're guides, but maybe we're midwives. Maybe we're helping people birth.
You can claim that, brother.
You're gonna make your fantasy team come alive.
But Pitts, yeah, exactly. With Pitts, I mean, listen, if you're gonna talk about him being an outlier, to me, if there's any negative connotation for him being an outlier, it would be that he's Jimmy Graham and he can't block, but that's not true. I mean, this is a guy that actually, if you wanted him to be an inline blocker and you needed to use him as such, he could develop into one. I mean, if this were 1992 and he came along, they'd ask him to add probably another 10 pounds. He'd work on his blocking a little bit more. He wouldn't overextend as much as he needs to. But he has the technique already. I mean, I would say in 2 years, he's going to be he'll be just as much of a competent blocker as Irv Smith, who's a great technician, but isn't going to gain any more weight. And Pitts is already heavier than Irv Smith. So you add that, you look at that and say, if back in 92, when we didn't have these type of players, what would he be? He'd be Tony Gonzalez or Sterling Sharp, Shannon Sharp. And to me, those guys are kind of outliers in themselves. But really, what he is a pass catcher. You're not going to waste him just in line. You're going to use him outside on the wing in the Jimmy Graham-like role. You could use him as a wide receiver. I think he's what folks like myself, probably Dane Brugler, other people thought Evan Ingram could be at his best. And I think that you're getting a player who is a little bigger than Ingram, just as fast as Ingram, or pretty close, and more consistent of a pass catcher and a better route runner. And on top of that, even a better blocker. So, yeah.
Definitely more aggressive, Matt. You see more aggression with Pitts than you did with Ingram.
Yeah, you do. And he just messes with people with his speed. He toys with SEC linebackers and safeties with his pacing and his routes, which is excellent. And then, he can win against cornerbacks, basically with his size and his technique. And listen, Detroit should draft him because they can go 2 tight ends. Hawkinson played well last year, and you can put Pitts on the outside if you want to. You can use him in a number of ways and get a lot of value out of him. I don't care what position he plays. His agent cares more about that, and Pitts cares more about it from a money standpoint. But, as a fan, he's going to help the team. That's all I know.
Yeah. What about the Waller comparison, Matt? Did you like that? You see that?
I do that. I do like that, but I think Darren Waller is actually aspiring to be Kyle Pitts because Kyle Pitts is a much better blocker than Waller ever was. Waller came to it as a receiver, learning how to block, and Waller's a fantastic receiver. Don't get me wrong, and he's playing very well, and I think he's going to develop into at least a competent backside blocker. But Pitts is a guy who can develop into a competent front side blocker and not even have to do double teams to do that. And I think that's the difference. It's just that, again, do you really want him to do that? Do we really need him to be that type of player?
Right.
And the guy who drafts him to do that is probably going to have bags stuffed with excrement and lit on fire in front of his house, probably by fans, if that's the kind of thing that goes on, and it limits his ability as a pass catcher.
Well, Bloom, let's talk about this because Liability 99 says Dolphins, and there was a report, I think it was Armando, I might be mistaken, that was like Gesicki could be traded. It was one of those Dolphins guys, where it's like, it was interesting. I remember writing about it on the Newswire for Football Guys. I'm like, Gesicki could be traded. Are they identifying Pitts then for the Dolphins in the first round?
Well, I could see the Dolphins looking at Pitts and saying that is the best case scenario when they trade it back up to 6. So again, here we are back in the psychoanalysis zone, right? Because we heard it was like the 2 shoes. We heard one shoe drop, and we thought that was the only shoe when Miami moved from 3 back to 12, and they go back up to 6. So what are they thinking? What are they thinking when they go from 12 up to 6? Well, they're penciling in 3 quarterbacks. So they must have 3 non-quarterbacks that they feel comfortable with. Not just comfortable, that they're excited to get, and that they feel almost certain won't fall to number 12. And who are those 3 players, right? It makes sense that one of them would be Pitts, one would be Chase, and maybe a third would be an Alabama receiver. An Alabama receiver is kind of if Chase and Pitts go ahead of us. And I don't think we can count out Sewell just because, why couldn't they bump Robert Hunt inside the guard? Why couldn't they? The idea is help Tua succeed. That helps Tua succeed too. There's definitely going to be an emphasis on, I think moving up from 12 to 6 shows that they see a very large tier separation between the players available at 12 and the players available at 6, which is something to think about if you're Atlanta, right? Atlanta and Denver, because the tier drop from 4 to 9 might be similar to the tier drop from 6 to 12 if you're looking purely at offense. Now, if you're Atlanta and you're looking at defense, you're not sweating it. You're probably going to get the first cornerback off the board or one of the top 2. You could get Parsons. So I think that Pitts makes a lot of sense for Miami as a best case scenario, but not one that they're counting on. And when we're doing that psychoanalysis like we are with Kyle Shanahan, I will say this, looking at Chris Grier, looking at Brian Flores, I think they have clarity and they're willing to act on their beliefs. And I think that it wouldn't be a curveball or something that flusters them. They may be going in thinking, we're going to get a guy that Tua is familiar with to boost this offense. And if Pitts is there, they probably won't hesitate. I think they know who good football players are, what they look like. I don't think they're locked into one team building strategy. And I, for one, would love to see it. And it would certainly make trading back up to 6 more than worth it.
It is the Audible Live here, and check out our YouTube channel, youtube.com/footballguystv. Make sure to do all those YouTube things, like, comment, share, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so that you never miss a vid. Also, check out footballguys.com. We've got off-season content. We've got our daily newsletter coming back up after the draft, and the newswire does not stop. So just check us out at footballguys.com. We appreciate each and every one of you for doing that. Appreciate each and every one of you for getting the rookie scouting portfolio, of course, at mattwaldman.com. Check out the RSP, and let's go. We got about 15 minutes left, Matt. Unfortunately, I got to run for my show tonight. But, I hate when someone's a baby something, like Harold Miner was baby Jordan back in the day, and it's like he couldn't hold a candle to Michael Jordan. Now we have baby Gronk, Pat Fryermuth, whatever. They're Penn State, Vermouth. Let's start drinking and let's talk about baby Gronk and what you think of him as we get into these other tight ends.
I'm a big fan of his, but he's Rob Slokowski. That's actually that's the best nickname I've heard of him, and I'm totally cool with Rob Slokowski, because even for a Rob Slokowski, he can get down the seam, especially on play action. He wins the ball very well. He's a rugged player after the catch. He has the fluid mobility you're looking for. That's similar to Rob Gronkowski in that sense. And he will run you over, and he will put you on your hind parts as a blocker. He's the best blocker in this class. And I honestly think that if I were to do a top 5 of blockers of the past 5 years, he would probably be on that list. So you can look at that. Yeah, you could probably say Jason Witten in that regard. But I don't know if he's even as quick as Witten on that. I like the comparison you guys had with Heath Miller. I think he's what Heath Miller could be if he weren't asked to be chained to Ben Roethlisberger's hip, as kind of an escort, so a bodyguard, whatever you want to put him as. So, I like him a lot. I think Jacksonville's going to wind up with him at the bottom of the first round or an early second round. And that's going to be a really nice pick for them, where they can get someone to succeed Mercedes Lewis, from when they had him. And then Tyler Eifert, is kind of has been that bridge right now, but you can get a better blocker and a guy who can give you what Eifert can give you right now. And that's, it's not as much as what he did when he was first picked, but he's easily my second player.
Bloom, thoughts on baby Gronk?
Yeah, I think the idea here is more NFL value than fantasy value. That being said, it's a low bar at tight end, and he can definitely be above the tight end 1 bar at the top 12. I think Jacksonville is an excellent destination. I like the way you put early second in there too, because Jacksonville has flexibility. They're in a really, really good spot. When I was talking to Paul Perticchese today, one of the things I said was, we haven't really admired or let breathe enough the idea that Chad Kahn went out and got Urban Meyer. I mean, whether it's brilliant or terrible, it's a big, big move. And adding that kind of piece to his offense, I think, is going to allow. It's the same reason that Belichick went out and got Johnny Smith and Hunter Henry. Tight ends give your offense flexibility. That's partially why this learning curve is so steep, because they're learning 2 positions. And as Matt pointed out, Freiermuth is going to give you quality contributions at both. And I think it's another pick that we'll applaud, just like with Heath Miller. Remember, Heath Miller was hurt when the Steelers took him at the end of the first round. He had a hernia. So getting a similar player without any risk of injury, not that was a major injury, I think will be an excellent pick. And it's exactly the kind of pick that a playoff team makes, right? Baltimore. This is exactly the kind of pick that you look at a team making to say, we know we can do something with this player to improve our offense, no matter what we have.
Matt, let's talk about the rest of the tight ends. I hate to cluster them in like that. But give me some of your favorites. I can tell you what I thought about Kenny Yeboah, who was a late round pick from Ole Miss, and how he looked good as a receiver. Definitely better than he did on film. But let's get to this class, because Bloom said, better when talking about Freiermuth, like better pro than fantasy. I kind of get that feeling with some of these tight ends. What do you feel about this class?
Sure. Probably the next best fantasy guy, there's two. And it's going to be Brevin Jordan out of Miami, who's an excellent receiver. He can get up the seam. He gives you that ability to block. He's a lot like Irv Smith. But that's the thing. When you look at Irv Smith, you have to understand that Smith is the type of guy that all the fantasy people, especially dynasty leagues, are really high on, but he hasn't really done anything major yet, just flashed on film. But as good of a technically sound blocker as he is he big enough to be that all-around tight end? And, is he more of a tweener like James Casey? And you wonder about James Casey, who was like, we all loved, but he never really had a firm role. Is this the time for that to happen? Is this the era where it could happen? I hope so. If it does, then you look at Irv Smith and you can piggyback Brevin Jordan on with him. But if not, the worst case is that Brevin Jordan his bubble bursts alongside Irv Smith, and Brev Jordan both have that kind of similar build. He kind of reminds me, at the worst case, he's Orson Charles. At the best, he's more of a modern James Casey. I would pick him, honestly, and take the chance because of where you're going to be able to get him. Tommy Tremble's very similar in that regard. Really hard physical player who's got a lot of upside in terms of his ability to become a better route runner. But a lot of people love Tremble because of the physicality of his game, and they feel like that his best years are ahead of him.
Would you think he's an H-back or maybe even like a use check at the pro level?
Yeah, he's a little taller than what you'd like to see for that type of role, but I think it's there. And I think another one who's a kind of a sneaky good one is Noah Gray out of Duke. Noah Gray has very good route skills. He's extremely quick. And when you watch his game, I mean, he's going to win against linebackers, and he's going to even win against some safeties. He's basically a maxed out wide receiver at about 245. But you can use him as an H-back. And I think he's one of those guys that in a couple years, we might be looking at him as a better version of Hollister. I would add maybe two more players to consider. I like Yaboa's receiving skill. Pro Wells is a basketball player out of TCU who really wins the ball extremely well, but that's about it right now. So you want to see him develop. Sean Byer, former tight end at Iowa, former wide receiver prospect, who Kittle says he likes how this guy moves. And when you watch him, you can certainly see some of that. He certainly has a great catch radius. You can get a little bit better as a blocker, but you got to at least be half decent as a blocker at Iowa to subsist at that position, I guess. I mean, you can tell me about Fant and we can go from there. But but I certainly like those guys. I think that there's a kid by the name of Bates out of Boise State.
Yeah, he's a good Senior Bowl guy too.
Yeah,
he's a Y. You know.
Exactly. He's a smooth guy who can get up the seam if you need him to. Zach Ertz has been mentoring him a bit, and you can see he's a decent blocker too. There's some skill there with that. So those are guys that just kind of check off my list as options. And of course, the Boston College kid is also everyone. Hunter Long, he's that guy that probably could start for you. He may never be a fantasy guy beyond the top 12 to 15 in any given year. But he's quick enough. He's reliable with his hands, runs good routes, even though he's not dynamic, but he's a good blocker as well.
Bloom, do you see Jacob Harris as a wide receiver or tight end? I've seen the debate go back and forth.
I think, well, I see Matt smiling because we just talked about him. And I'm going to defer to Matt here and say he can stay at wide receiver. And I think, these are the kind of players we're going to track 2 or 3 years down the line. But I do want to hijack your question here and make sure that we mention Matt Bushman.
Oh, yeah.
And I wonder if Bushman hadn't torn his Achilles and he was playing with Zach Wilson at the height of Zach Wilson this year, how much hype would he have created? How much would we be talking about him? So he had his pro day. His pro day numbers were fine. I mean, he's not, his Achilles recovery isn't totally over, but he's a very crafty receiver. And for fantasy, we should have our antenna up because he is another one that's going to be drafted purely as a receiver, and has some latent upside because he's coming in injured, because he's an older prospect also, which might knock down his stock, but it didn't knock down Hunter Henry's very much. So we'll see. So I think that's a name that I have stashed away, and I'll be interested to see if he lands in an offense, or maybe even some of the Jets can do, where the Jets can go ahead and draft him because he'll probably be there in the 6th or 7th round.
All right, that is a wrap for this evening's program, everyone. It's the Audible Live. Make sure to check us out and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Help us grow the YouTube channel. Like, comment, share, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so that you never miss a vid. Follow us all on Twitter, at Matt Waldman, at Sigmund Bloom, at Cecil Lammey. The show is at the Audible. We thank you all very much for listening. Be back next week. More NFL draft talk, and in 2 weeks, the NFL draft. So it's all for you right here live. Also, new shows debuting on our YouTube channel and in our Audible feed. So make sure to check those guys out. Give our new guys likes and subscriptions and comments and all those sorts of good things, because it is football, guys, and we are here for you. He's Sigmund. He's awesome. He's Matt. He's fantastic. I'm Cecil. Not shabby. Everyone out there, thanks for watching. Stay tuned and stay frosty.
I miss Bloom and his team.